Hi there, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the Family Law Insider podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Hernandez, and today we're talking revenge porn. Now, this is a hot issue in today's day and age, and it's one that's making waves more in Arizona as of late because a law has been passed regarding revenge porn. So today I have somebody who specializes in business and social media law. It's Ruth Carter, and she's the owner, founder, and head attorney at the Carter Law Firm in Phoenix, Arizona. Ruth has written several best-selling books. She does all kinds of interesting things, which we may hear more about during the podcast, but today we're going to talk with Ruth about revenge porn. So welcome, Ruth, and thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
So, Ruth, there are a lot of people out in the world who don't know what revenge porn is, so can you just fill us in a little bit about what it means?
So, revenge porn generally occurs when a couple takes intimate photos in the bedroom, and then, or someone sends their partner a selfie where they're not dressed, and then when the relationship goes sour, one of the person who's not in the photo or video posts it online without the other person's consent.
Okay, so is revenge porn a newer concept, or has this been around for years and I just haven't heard about it until recently?
I'm sure it's been around for years, but it's become more of an issue now that everybody has, a camera and a video camera in their phone. So, whereas before, if you were going to take intimate photos, there was a whole production. You had to have your camera and your film and take the photos, develop the photos, or shoot the video and have it on a tape or a disc. And so there was a whole production to share it, and then to put it out there was a production. The internet's only been around for a short period of time, relatively, but now with social media and more people understanding how easy it is to create a website or just to upload images and videos to sites, it's just become much more prolific.
Yeah, it's really easy to download those things now, and once a person downloads them, is there any way to delete it once it's out there? Do you know?
That's a challenge, because once you put something out there, whether it's a text, a tweet, a post, whatever, even if you delete the original, who knows who else has already seen it, downloaded it, taken a screenshot of it, etc. So even if the original goes away and it can't be obtained from that source, it can still be out there and just a lot harder to track down.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the law that was recently passed in Arizona. Can you talk to the listeners about what the law says revenge porn is generally, and how it's punished in Arizona if somebody's convicted?
Sure. So they just passed HB 2515, which is commonly referred to as the revenge porn law, which makes it a crime to post revenge porn without the other person's consent. So the law, once they actually add it to the criminal code, will be Arizona Revised Statute 13-1425, if anyone wants to look it up. It makes it a felony to post revenge porn. If the person in the photo or video is recognizable, it's a Class 4 felony, which the minimum punishment is a year in jail. And if the person is not recognizable, it's only a Class 5 felony.
Okay. So we're talking serious repercussions of somebody being convicted of this.
Very serious repercussions for something a person would do at a split-second moment when they're really pissed off.
Exactly. Are there any potential fines that are associated with the law in addition to potential imprisonment?
So the fine for felony in Arizona is up to $150,000, I believe.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't. How much would they charge in this type of case? I can't tell you, but it could be very expensive.
All right. And Ruth, do you know when this law is scheduled to actually hit the revised statutes and go into effect, or is it in effect now?
So I reached out to several police departments over the weekend trying to figure out how they expected to investigate these crimes when they're reported, and one of them reported back that the law will go into effect on July 24th of this year.
Okay. And in talking with the police departments, did you get a sense for how often this type of crime is reported?
I haven't yet. I've had several people contact me in the past saying that they've been a victim of revenge porn, and my response to anybody who contacts me claiming that they've been a victim of a crime, because we do also have a crime in the criminal code for cyber harassment. So I generally tell people go report it to the police for this. But how many of those reports they get and how many of those end in conviction, I don't know.
Okay. And can you give the listeners a general idea of the difference between cyber harassment and the revenge porn law that was just passed?
So with harassment, there generally has to have the intent to harass the person. With all crimes, as us lawyers know, you have to have the mental state and the action to have the crime. So if you don't have the intent to harass, or knowing that what you're doing is harassing, you probably don't have harassment. With the revenge porn law, it's just you have to knowingly post the photos online. So it doesn't matter what your motivation for doing it was. It was just you knew what you were doing and you did it.
Okay.
Or you knew that you were going to post a photo. You don't even have to know that it was a crime.
Okay. So ignorance of the law is not an excuse, right? We hear that all the time.
Nope, ignorance is not bliss.
Okay. So there's a couple of things that you mentioned about the law that raised some questions for me. First of all, do you have any ideas or thoughts on how somebody or how the state would go about proving that somebody has violated this revenge porn law? How's that even possible?
That can be a challenge because just because you know who you sent, your intimate selfie to, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the person who posted it online. That person, however, the fact that they distributed it, they potentially distributed it, could be enough because you only have to distribute it. It doesn't actually have to show up on a website. So if you just forward the text or forward the email to your friend, that could be enough. So the only, I think, only excuse you might be able to prove if you were the recipient of an intimate photo, and you were accused of revenge porn, probably the only way you could get out of it is if you could prove that your phone was stolen or that your email was hacked, and there would be a series of reports that show, hey, I bought a new phone, I reported it to my email, I changed my password, something that would show, hey, I wasn't the person in control of my account when this happened. Otherwise, I would say just the fact that if you were the only person that had access, and the other person, the person who took the selfie, didn't, so you can prove, hey, it didn't come from me, because who's to say that, I could take an intimate photo, share it with my boyfriend, and when we break up, I post it myself and then report him for revenge porn. That's a vindictive, awful thing to do. I would never do that.
Right.
But could a vindictive person try that? Yes. What the police would hopefully do in that situation is try to trace the post back to the IP address, which is the internet source where it was posted from. So that would show, because every internet access point has a unique number. So if you posted it from your own home or your own phone, we could trace that, versus if you were at a public Wi-Fi spot like a coffee shop or a library, that would be much harder to build a case that a particular person posted that image or video, versus if it came out of your home and you live alone, that's pretty strong evidence that you were the culprit or had something to do with it.
Right. So, I can see, because I used to be a criminal prosecutor and a defense attorney, in cases where, a person was found with drugs in their pants, for example, oftentimes they would say, well, those weren't my pants. Mm-hmm. And I could see somebody in this situation saying, well, even though the photo came from my computer at my home, somebody else accessed it. Mm-hmm. Which you alluded to earlier. But what's interesting to me is the fact that, if I heard you right, that the photo or the picture, the film, doesn't necessarily have to be distributed to the internet or to the world to make this punishable. Am I understanding that right?
It just has to be distributed. It
Okay.
doesn't have to be publicly distributed. So if it's like a situation where, you take an intimate selfie and you text that to your significant
New girlfriend.
other, your girlfriend, and she forwards it on to one friend, that might be enough.
Okay. Wow.
So that's still just, it'll be interesting to see how various words are defined under this law. To see, because I could easily see if something is distributed via text message, that could be just as bad as posting it on a website, depending on how many people are seeing it.
Definitely. Okay. So thank you for that. You mentioned the word recognizable when you were talking to us about this law. And there are differences in punishment depending on whether the person in the photo or film or whatever is recognizable. So do you see any potential problems with the way the law is worded in terms of recognizable, or any concerns?
That was one of my questions of how do you prove that it's recognizable? Because if the person isn't recognizable, how do you prove that it's you?
Right.
Whether that you have, and I guess you could probably maybe do it through circumstantial evidence of, you recognize certain scars, or the room, and through the metadata in the photo, you can say, I can tell you I was in that room on this date and naked. But, you can try to build that case, but in that situation, it would probably be less likely that you would become aware that that photo is out there, unless someone who knew you that well could show you that photo and say, isn't this you? Versus it's much easier if it's a situation where we see your face, you have a distinct tattoo, something like that makes it obvious. If you saw that, you're like, whoa, that's me.
Right.
Versus, nondescript person, if it was like a video shot in a hotel room where they all look the same, much harder to prove that that was you.
Okay, so just so people out there listening know, just because the other person's face is not showing in the film or the video doesn't mean that they're not recognizable. Do you think that's an accurate statement?
That's what I would expect. I haven't seen that word defined yet, but I would think that there are other ways to be recognizable even if your face is not visible.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Very good information. So, in terms of family law, can you see any way that this new law could be woven in terms of a relationship where one person is saying, hey, I was a victim of domestic violence?
I could absolutely, because as you know, domestic violence doesn't necessarily mean physical violence. It can also be emotional violence and emotional abuse. So I could easily see somebody being vindictive to an ex or even a current partner by posting intimate photos or demanding that they pose and then distributing them without their permission. I could absolutely see that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that really this is going to add a new layer to what we already see in family law as far as people going on their Facebook rants and their Twitter rants about the other person and bad-mouthing them, because in my own cases, I've had some situations where those type of rants had a real effect on the judge's ruling.
Mm-hmm. And I also wonder if it's a situation, let's say it's a couple that's divorcing, and one of the future ex-spouses is dating somebody else, and that other partner posts the photos or videos. If that divorce isn't final yet, or there's a child custody issue, if the parent who wasn't in that photo or video could go back to the court and say, I want to use this revenge porn as evidence that my future ex or now ex is a bad parent, and we should either change or adjust our situation.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and I could see being on both sides of the issue. If I were on the side where, the partner who has the new partner who posted the picture, I would say, well, Arizona is a no-fault state, so who cares, on one hand. But on the other hand, it might kind of show
Bad judgment.
Bad judgment. Exactly. Thank you.
Or what if it's a situation where you can like hear a child's voice in the background or something
Right.
like that, where it's like, hey, it sounds like my partner or my ex-spouse is having sex while they're, while they're in charge of my children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and so that is something to be aware of big time. And, like you mentioned earlier, Ruth, I think that a lot of times, as a criminal defense attorney, I found that people who were in trouble, they got themselves in trouble because they made snap decisions that were in the spur of the moment. Really not a lot of thought was put into them. And then before you know it, your life has changed forever.
Right.
Exactly. Just as in the instance of, you get angry at somebody driving down the road, so you pull out your gun. That can land you in prison for years. And the same with revenge porn.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you're angry in the spur of the moment, so you post it. On the flip side, I tell people, if you're going to take intimate photos and videos, I'm not judging. Do what you feel like doing, but do it on your own device, and then never let your device out of your control.
Okay.
Because it only takes one person to get their hands on it for it to get away from you, and who knows where it's going to end up and what repercussions that could have or impact it'll have on you, your family life, your professional life, your social reputation.
Yeah, and I think what's really difficult is when two people are in a loving relationship and everything is hunky-dory and fantastic, and it seems like it's okay. But then there comes a point where things go sideways and the picture leaks out.
Exactly.
So just keep that in mind if, and I'm not judging either, because people, are going to do what they want to do. But keep it in mind that if ever things go wrong, then that's out there, potentially.
Right. No, my rule of thumb for everybody is don't post anything or don't send anything that you wouldn't put on the front page of the newspaper, because that's where it could easily end up.
Okay.
In the wrong situation, in the worst case scenario.
Thank you for that. So, okay, so we've talked about revenge porn and we talked about cyber harassment. Are there any other legal causes of action or implications of somebody leaking the types of videos and pictures that we're talking about here, Ruth?
There could be an argument under copyright, actually, because the person who takes the photo or video is usually the copyright holder. And so they have one of the rights they get with that is the right to control where that image or work is copied, distributed, displayed, etc. So that's one way to if someone, especially in a situation where they're trying to get images or videos taken down off of websites, submitting a copyright claim could be enough to at least get the photos down. It'd be like, hey, I own the copyright, not the other person. Make it go away.
So in order to own the copyright, like if I take a picture of the people in my office, do I automatically own it, or do I have to go and file an application for a copyright to have that?
So you own the copyright in the photos you take the second you take them. In most situations, unless it's a situation where like you were hired to take the photo and part of the agreement is that they own it. But in day-to-day activities, you're throwing a party, you're going to the park, you're at the mall and you're just taking photos for fun, you own those photos. So you do not have to register them with the Copyright Office to get your copyright rights. If you wanted to sue for copyright infringement, you'd have to register them. But even without registration, there are still other legal avenues to pursue on a copyright front if someone wanted to.
Okay, so that's a good that's some good information to have there. So in terms of the copyright infringement, just for the people out there listening who don't know, this is not something that the police would prosecute for you, correct?
No, this would be something you would pursue on your own or with probably a copyright attorney. Another thing that I hope people understand is that just because they are in the photo doesn't mean that they own the copyright to it. It's the person. Often it's the person who took the photo, not the people who are in it. So So I get hits on my site every day from people who are asking if they can make a photo of them that showed up on Facebook go away. And most of the time the answer is no. If you don't own the copyright, there's nothing you can do. So there are photos, I can tell you there are photos of me from when I was at a public event that I'm not, super happy with where they ended up. There's nothing bad on them. It ended up, just to be clear, it ended up on Pinterest, and I don't like Pinterest. And I was like, ew, what's my photo doing on Pinterest? I want to make it go away. And then I remembered, you weren't the photographer. You don't own that photo. So the fact that you don't like that your face is on Pinterest doesn't mean that you have any rights to make it or any ability to make it go away.
Got it. So if I were going about my business, whatever that business was, and somebody took my picture, even if I didn't know about it, that then they would still own the copyright.
Correct.
Oh, wow. So that raises a question for me. What about those situations where somebody's engaged in a sexual act with another person, they're not aware that they're being filmed? Is there any remedy for that person if they don't own the copyright? Does that make sense?
Potentially. If someone took a photo of you and you were out in public, and it wasn't like you were in a dressing room or a doctor's office where you would expect to have some level of privacy, then there's nothing you can do. But if we're talking about a situation where you are in the privacy of your home or your partner's home or a hotel room, there's an expectation of privacy there. And so you may not have a copyright claim against the person, but you could have a claim for invading your privacy.
Okay. All right. And so those types of claims, are they difficult to pursue? Is there a high level of proof that's required for an invasion of privacy lawsuit?
Well, those laws are, of course, based on state laws, so you'd have to look at what the law is in the particular state and what the case law history is and all that. But generally, if there is an expectation of privacy and there's a photo taken without your consent and it gets out there, I would expect it to be relatively easy to show, hey, I had an expectation of privacy in this circumstance, so photos of it should not be widely distributed or even distributed to, my now ex-boyfriend's friends.
Okay. And just for the sake of clarity, is an invasion of privacy lawsuit one that would be prosecuted by the police or by a person on their own or with the help of an attorney?
You could pursue it through the police because we do have laws against voyeurism. So it could be a voyeurism law violation. It could be the revenge porn law violation, or you could have a civil suit, or a combination of those.
Okay. This is really interesting information, and I'm excited to see how the law unfolds and how many cases we're seeing prosecuted for revenge porn, and maybe after some time has passed, we can have a follow-up and debrief on what's happening in Arizona, Ruth.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how many crimes are going to be reported once this law goes into effect, and I'm interested to see how the police go about investigating them, how the prosecutor's office prosecutes, and what the results are going to be. I'm really interested, especially since the penalties are so high. I'm really interested to see what the results are going to be.
All right, so stay tuned, everybody. And it's about time to wrap up, Ruth, but I would love for you to share with people what else it is that you do and how they can find you. I know you're really active in the community here in Phoenix, and I'm excited for you to share that as well as more about your practice with our audience.
Okay. Well, I'm the owner of Carter Law Firm in Phoenix, and my practice focuses on business contracts, copyrights, trademarks, social media law, and flash mob law. I've written 3 books on the legalities of blogging, social media, and flash mobs. People can find me at my website, carterlawaz.com. I'm also very active on Twitter at rbcarter. And those are the best ways to find me.
Okay, awesome, Ruth. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time. It's been a really fun conversation.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, you're welcome. And to all you out there listening, that's going to do it for this episode of the Family Law Insider Podcast. Remember, we're on your side when it matters most, and I will see you next time.